up in your business. If right now you're sitting at your computer, you might want to watch us live on flagandbanner.com's Facebook page. It's kind of fun to see what goes on behind the scenes, and today a lot is going on behind the scenes. If you're a fan of the show and you've watched it before, you can see that it's a little hectic. We've changed our studio from, not from KABF, we're still on KABF, but we've changed from the studio we were in on one side of the hall to a new studio on the other side of the hall, and it's Corey's studio. What's the name of it, Corey?
The Artist Lounge Studio.
That's right. So we've got a little bit of technical difficulties because it's our first time, but our guest is being very patient with us, and all the people here are being very team-oriented. We're all working together really good. So tune into Facebook Live so you can see all the chaos and see the new studio. It's really fun. This show, Up in Your Business with Kerry McCoy, began with entrepreneurs in mind, a platform for me, a small business owner and a guest, to pay forward our experiential knowledge in a conversational way. As with all new endeavors, it's had some unexpected outcomes. For instance, this show began with entrepreneurs and wannabe entrepreneurs in mind, but we found it has a much wider appeal because, after all, who isn't inspired by everyday people's American-made stories? Another discovery I find interesting is that many of my guests have a spiritual bend and the heart of a teacher. And last, that business in of itself is creative. My guest today is all of the above. He has an inspiring life story, knows a lot about creation, has a big heart of a teacher, and his spiritual bend is more than most because he's an Episcopal priest who has hailed from all over the United States, including Wall Street, that became ground zero when the Twin Towers fell. Today we're going to visit with Father Stuart Hoke, who recently moved back to Little Rock, Arkansas, and became the assisting priest at Trinity Cathedral in downtown Little Rock. If you're just tuning in for the first time, you may be asking yourself, what's this lady's story and why should I listen? Well, my newest co-host, Corey, is here to tell you.
All right. Over 40 years ago, with only $400, Kerry McCoy founded the Arkansas Flag and Banner. During the last 4 decades, the business has grown and has changed dramatically. Door-to-door sales, telemarketing, to mail order and catalog sales. Now, Flag and Banner relies heavily on internet, including its newest feature, live chatting. With time and experience, Kerry's business and leadership knowledge has grown. As early as 2004, she began sharing this knowledge on her weekly blog. Today, she uses her learned skills to found the nonprofit Friends Dreamland Ballroom, as well as in-the-house publication Brave Magazine, and now this very radio show. Each week on this show, you'll hear candid conversations between her and her guests and real-world experiences on a variety of businesses and topics, and we hope you will find it interesting and inspiring. If you would like to ask Kerry a question or share your story, send an email to questions@upinyourbusiness.org.
Thank you, Corey. My guest today is the Episcopal priest and Doctor of Theology, Father Stuart Hoke. Dr. Hoke was born in Memphis, Tennessee, but raised across the wide Mississippi River in Blytheville, Arkansas. He is a Mustang. Mitch hadn't heard that in a while. Having graduated from SMU, Southern Methodist University in Dallas, Texas. He then went on to receive his Master of Divinity degree from the Episcopal Divinity School in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Father Hoke spent most of his ministry serving congregations in Arkansas and Texas, until in 1996 he got the academic bug and completed the Master of Sacred Theology degree at New York's General Theological Seminary. For the next 8 years, he would serve as executive assistant to the Rector of Trinity Church, Wall Street in New York City, and missioner to St. Paul's Chapel at Ground Zero. I'd like to talk to him about that. For the past 30 years, Dr. Hoke has not only been spreading the good news of God's grace, but also that of AA's 12-step recovery program. In his ministry of recovery, he has pioneered 2 nationally recognized courses on the church's role in the treatment of alcoholism and addictive illness. He is renowned for his workings with congregations and Diocese of impaired clergy. Dr. Hoke has now moved back to Arkansas, where he's the assistant priest at Trinity Episcopal Cathedral in downtown Little Rock, and he continues his active participation and ministry in the 12-step recovery program. It is a pleasure to welcome to the table Reverend Dr. Stuart Hoke. That means,
good morning, good afternoon.
Blytheville, Arkansas, that means either your parents worked at the Air Force Base, they were farmers, or they worked at the steel plant. Which one?
My father was stationed at the Army Air Force Base. She was the daughter of one of the first stores in the city, the Hubbard Furniture Company.
Oh, you're kidding.
So we were...
You were rich.
We were just absolutely not rich, but we were comfortable.
Yeah, you were the small town furniture owner in small Blytheville, Arkansas.
And you pronounce it correctly, Blytheville, Arkansas.
I have friends from Blytheville. I've been there.
Mm-hmm.
The Air Force Base, I think, is moved out though.
Air Force Base is gone now. The city's much smaller than it was when I was growing up.
But it's got great fertile ground on the Mississippi River.
Oh.
You know, great
Yeah.
farming country. I just heard the other day that Bill Gates was buying up some Delta land in Arkansas.
Yeah.
You knew that?
Black dirt, it's a wonderful place.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
After reading about you, it seems like you always kind of knew you wanted to be a priest because you went to college to be a priest. You went to SMU?
Went to SMU. I knew I wanted to be a clergy person long time ago. I didn't tell anybody. That's not the kind of thing you tell your teenage friends, but that's what I wanted.
How'd you know that?
Well, my parents were active Episcopalians. We were in church every Sunday. The Episcopal priest in town, even in that little town, was always the educated bon vivant. He knew the bon vivant. He was the
these
one.
Episcopal preachers, they're just so educated. What does that mean?
He knew his salad fork from his entree fork, ate well. He took me to the opera in Memphis. Just men like that, educated, worldly, who'd been around, gave me a good model. I said, I want to do that. So I did it.
That's a lot of responsibility for you guys to follow in his footsteps.
Went to SMU. My father insisted that I be an engineer. I fixed that by making my first and only D in calculus. So that was the end of my engineering career, and I wanted to study religion and language. And my father thought that was not a good idea whatsoever.
So Latin, I guess?
Latin and Greek, yeah. Latin and Greek and religious studies at SMU. Most exciting courses I've ever taken.
Okay. After you graduated from college in the most exciting Latin and Greek courses you've ever taken, you decided to go on to get a master's, and you went to Cambridge, Massachusetts.
I did. It was the Vietnam War. I had a medical disability because I had tried to go into the service and that was not possible. Went to Cambridge, Massachusetts from Dallas, Texas in the fall of 1968. And
wow, right in the middle of it.
Right in the middle of it. And was in Cambridge for 4 years doing all the riots in the colleges in the nation. I was happened to be on the street when tear gas fell on 2 occasions. So I really learned something about the life of the church in the streets as well as in the church building itself. And it was the war, and we were really doing whatever we could to see that the war could stop. So many of my friends had died, and so many more were going to die. So we were very sensitized to that at the time. A great place for theological education during that period.
Did you work while you were there?
I did. I was a chaplain, student chaplain at the Bunker Hill Community Mental Health Center, which was in Charlestown, Massachusetts. It was an Irish ghetto, it was called at the time. And my job was to go around and meet the community and introduce them to the health center as well as to some dynamics of spiritual living, spiritual health. And there was a lot of talk about alcoholism at the time because Charlestown was full of it.
And Irish.
And Irish, exactly, yeah, exactly. So I listened closely. I'd grown up in alcoholism.
Your parents were?
It was in my family, very close in my family. I wanted to know as much as I could about it. In fact, I got a job. My first job in Cambridge, Massachusetts was as student chaplain at the Long Island Center for the Chronically Alcoholic. These were the Skid Row bums. And my first job there was to be an orderly. I helped clean them up after they got off the streets.
Were they Vietnam vets, a lot of them?
Some of them, yeah. Some
Seems
of them.
like that's a lot of the homeless people that are veterans of some of them. Oh, so your headset's off? No, that's okay. probably a great place for us to take a break. When we come back, we'll continue our conversation with Reverend Dr. Stuart Hoke, assisting priest at Trinity Episcopal Cathedral in downtown Little Rock, Arkansas. We'll hear about the role his New York City Trinity Church on Wall Street played after the fall of the Twin Towers that became Ground Zero. And last, we'll do an in-depth dig into the 12-step recovery program that he champions and shares. He started to give us a little taste of it then, but I think we've got some technical difficulties. We're going to take a little break right now, see if we can fix them. Stay tuned. More to come.
You're listening to All in Your Business, Kerry McCoy, a production of BlackandBanner.com. If you missed any part of this show or want to learn more about UIYB, go to BlackandBanner.com, click the radio show, or subscribe to your favorite podcast application. We'll be right back. So the headphone thing is people walking through.
Goes off and on.
Yeah.
One period went off for about
Somebody
10
make sure it's
seconds.
connected.
It's what?
Did I step on it when I came through?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, they're stepping on the wires.
They're popping. These are popping. Mine's popping. I can't get close to it. His is popping too. But that's,
Well, they're condensers, that's what they do, but the
I thought you
pop
said
filter
they-
might help.
huh?
Said that pop filter might help, but I doubt it will.
What, you think our listeners are hearing that pop? It's like
Not-
pee, 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 pee.
Not as intense as you are because I haven't.
Because if I get close, like you told me to get the robust, it
Right.
pops real bad.
Right. That's from just air movement, so those screens might help.
Okay. All right, so as people walking on your things, it's not affecting the show though, right?
Right.
Wait, he's asking him something over there.
Can you
Yeah,
hear
no,
now?
it's not.
Somebody
Can you hear?
patting you,
No, he's,
saying it's okay? All right, we're ready to go back in?
Are we up yet?
Huh?
are you wanting taking care of business to run out, or do you?
No, we'll go back in now. I'm ready to go back. You ready to go back, Stuart? All right, we're ready. You're listening to Up in Your Business with me, Kerry McCoy, and I'm speaking today with Reverend Dr. Stuart Hoke, Episcopal priest at Trinity Cathedral in downtown Little Rock, Arkansas. Before the break, we were talking about how Dr. Hoke became a preacher, how he kind of always knew he wanted to be one, and it's not really in your family, but it's in you. And that people in your life can really affect how you grow up to be, and that you had a great example of an Episcopal priest in Blytheville who really set a great example for you on how to be. And so now, after receiving your Master's of Divinity degree in Cambridge, Massachusetts, you worked and ministered all over Arkansas and Texas before you moved to New York City and 9/11 happened. So how did you go from Cambridge, Massachusetts to back to Texas and Arkansas to minister?
I was ordained in the Diocese of Oklahoma.
Oh, really?
By hook and crook, I was invited by the Bishop of Oklahoma to be a part of that crew over there. And he stationed me after ordination at a church in Tulsa. I was there for 2 years, and then a man from Little Rock called me and said, I want you to come work over here. And the bishop over here said, I want you to move across the state line. So,
Who was the bishop?
the bishop was Christoph Keller.
Oh, yeah. Mhm.
And so I moved to Arkansas, and this is home for me, and it felt so good. I was at St. Mark's here in Little Rock for 3 years, and then I moved to St. John's Church in Harrison. And was there
Arkansas?
for 6 years.
All right.
Yeah. And St. John's in Harrison at the time was a very conflicted church. I had grown up in a conflicted family, and I knew some of the dynamics of how to fix situations like that, so I employed them.
Did you fix it?
No, no, they fixed me.
You can't fix humans. We're just unfixable.
Yeah. Then I moved, I had a call to a big church in Texas, and I moved to Amarillo, Texas, spent 10 years there.
Where's that? Amarillo? Did you
Way
say
out in the
Amarillo?
Panhandle, yeah.
Oh, Amarillo.
Yeah. Mhm. Yeah. After that in Houston, after 29 years in parish ministry, being rector of parish,
Oh, okay.
I got the education bug, and I thought I would really like to go back to school. Feared that I couldn't even write a footnote, but I thought, well, I'd like to do that
How old
anyway.
are you now?
I'm 72,
Not now, but I mean then when you decided to go back.
49.
49, you
49.
decided to go back to get a PhD, I guess, right?
Yeah, got a master's degree just to try it out, see if I could do it. And then spent the next 4 years working on a PhD, like a PhD, an
Theology.
earned doctorate, yeah. and had no idea what I would do with that, but it's opened so many doors.
Really?
Just so many doors. It gave me a credential that I've needed in order to do some of the things that I've done. Not only write, but preach and teach hither and thither, and the degree has helped do that.
So you left, you were in Amarillo, and then you moved to Houston, to really another big church. You got the academic bug.
Moved to New York City.
You moved to New York City.
Absolutely loved living in New York.
In your early 40s.
Yeah, in my late 40s.
In your late 40s. Went to school for how long?
Went to school for 6 years, until I was 55. That's when I was awarded the doctoral degree. And simultaneously got a job at Trinity Church, Wall Street, which is probably the biggest Episcopal church in North America, as far as budget and outreach.
But there's nobody goes there.
Pardon?
But there's not hardly any parishioners. I've been there, actually. I went to service there one time. Matthew, you remember going to service there when we were in Wall Street?
Think
You
so.
were too young. We went there. It may have been you that's there. It's been so long ago, because it was right after 9/11, and we went to church in there, but there wasn't hardly anybody in it.
After 9/11, it was scary what had happened. No one was coming down.
There
And
were
now the
literally,
place is
there were
packed to the
20
gills.
people in this big, beautiful church.
And now it's packed to the gills on
Again.
Sunday morning.
That's
Yeah,
right.
yeah. So many of our people died in the tragedy, and so much fear about being down on Wall Street at the time. So it had to blow a year before it was back in
So you
full
had been
swing.
there for how long when 9/11 happened?
I was there for a year, and I lived on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, took the subway to my office every day. The office was about 75 yards from the first tower, from the North Tower.
Where were you when the planes hit?
I was on the subway when the first plane hit, and the subway conductor said, "We are approaching Chambers Street, where you'll need to get off and get on the other side to take the local train to get to Wall Street." And then he said, "Stay on the train. There has been an incident at the first tower." And then he screamed, "Stay on the train." So all of us stayed on the train. We had no idea what was going on. Got off at Rector Street near Wall Street, came up out of the subway tunnel. It was a beautiful day when I'd gotten on the train, and it was very cloudy when I got off. There was debris in the air. There were women's clothes coming down from the sky. And it was, people were screaming. A friend of mine said, "A small plane has just hit the first tower. Let's go down and see what's happened." So I said, "Well, let's go. I mean, I always want to see what's happening." And we went down, and if you know New York at all, we stood at the corner of Greenwich and Liberty Street at the entrance of the North Tower, watched the South Tower burn, 3 floors, kept hearing people saying, "It's only a small plane that's hit it. It's only a small plane." And yet we could see 3 entire floors engulfed by flame. And about that time, it was 2 minutes till 9 o'clock, another plane from the west came from out of the blue. It was right over our heads, 1,000 feet above us, hit the tower at an angle right where we were standing, and the debris began coming down. And the woman next to me had the most incredible question. She said, "Is this a setting for a movie?" And
Oh my gosh.
I thought immediately of Bruce Willis, and I thought, well, of course, this is one of his disaster movies. I said, "Yes." We just stood there until another friend came up to me, shook me literally by the scruff of my neck, and said, "Stuart, run for your life." And it dawned on me I was in trouble, and I ran for my life. Many didn't. Some of that debris covered some of the people with whom I was standing.
Joey? With whom you were standing?
Not too far away. All of that debris from the impact of the plane and what came down, the jet fuel, and the debris. I ran into the basement of the American Stock Exchange, and then the church office was right next door at Trinity Wall Street. Trinity's been there since 1689, so it's been a fixture on Wall Street. Ran in there, and the rector said to me, the rector is the pastor, I was his assistant, and he said, "People are streaming down Broadway, the major street in the city, and they're looking for shelter, and they're running into the church. Go over there and do something immediately." And I said, what do you want me to do? And he said, I don't know, just get there, go over there. So he spotted the organist and he said to the organist, go with Stuart, go to the church and you all do something immediately. People are coming in. And we went over and we did a spontaneous, impromptu service of scripture readings and hymns and prayers, mostly as crowd control.
Oh.
You could hardly call it worship, and yet it was that too. And some really amazing thing happened in that 45-minute segment between us getting there and the fall of the first tower. And when it fell, the windows fell out of Trinity, the lights went off, people got under the pews, some of the people got under the pews. So we had 45 really good minutes there to sing and to pray and to read salient pieces of scripture, like the 23rd Psalm. I read the 23rd Psalm, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. And there was a man in the congregation who did something I've never had done in all my years of ministry. He jumped up and said, do that again. And he loved that portion of, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death.
It's very comforting.
Yeah.
It's so comforting.
Yeah. He appeared again, but I've never had anyone do that, especially in an Episcopal service.
Yeah.
I did. You're going to sing. I was trying to choose very familiar hymns like
Onward Christian Soldier.
I wanted to do that, but I thought twice about that. I said the next hymn will be Nearer My God to Thee.
Oh,
Well,
yeah.
this man said, no,
No.
not that one. And if you're old enough, you remember that the first movie, The Titanic, as the ship was going down into the drink, the little brass band was playing Nearer My God to Thee. And amidst all of this cacophony and craziness and sirens and the darkening of the church, people laughed occasionally. And it reminded me of something about humor and humanity and humility. And we were really depending on God's grace to whatever would happen. But the humor was part of it, and it was, I think about that a lot. That was such a gift at that moment.
We're coming up on 9/11.
Coming up soon, it's, 6 weeks away.
Not that you're counting.
Well, I do this every year. That I was really involved in that day, and I was, when that tower fell, I was leading that congregation when some of them got under the pews. It was a moment of horror because the lights went out, it got dark. There was a woman on the front row who was screaming at the top of her lungs, Jesus, Jesus. There was someone at the back of the church going, anthrax, anthrax. And me thinking, well, is he prescient? What's he doing? Does he a mind read? And then the verger, the guy that handles all the services in that big church, he was going, shut up, shut up. And it was my job to try to settle things down and to keep right on going and be faithful to what was at hand. And a policeman came in and he said, you all need to get out of here quickly. If that second building falls, and he told us what had happened, this time it may fall right on the top of Trinity. There are boats of all shapes, models, and kinds down in the harbor waiting to evacuate the island. So get down there as fast as you can, and people fled.
I didn't realize people fled the island.
They did. It's now known as the biggest naval evacuation in the history of evacuations.
I did not know that.
Over 100, maybe 200,000 people were evacuated.
Did you evacuate by boat?
I
Where'd you
did.
go?
Well, I ran back into the office building before I went to the boat. We had a day school at the time, and it was early in the morning. We had 150 children. Only 90 had gotten there that day. If the terrorists had come just a little bit later, so many more parents would have been in the World Trade Center. Anyway, it was a cold day. It was the first cold day of the year. Staff members wrapped the little tiny babies and children up in their coats. And at a given signal, we ran down the street. We ran toward the Staten Island Ferry. And the second building fell at that particular moment. You've seen pictures probably of the dust ball that comes down the street. Well, it engulfed us. It was 240 miles an hour, I think it was clocked, that particular ball of terror. and it knocked everybody all over the place.
So
And
you
we
all
couldn't
got
see a
separated.
thing.
So you
Couldn't
all
see-
got separated.
We could hear babies crying, and someone said, "Am I dead? Am I dead?" Well, we picked ourselves up, got our bearings, and thanks to a wonderful young business manager at the church itself, led all of us again on the road to the Staten Island Ferry. And we got there eventually. And there were boats of all kinds leading people to one place or another. The fascinating thing is 2 buses came down the sidewalk. You have to imagine all the streets were gridlocked. People had jumped out of their cars, even leaving the cars running. They were everywhere, but 2 buses came down the sidewalks, stopped where we were, city buses, and said, "We can take your children and your day school teachers to shelter. We know a route up the FDR freeway. We will take them to St. Rose's in the Bronx, and there they'll be safe. Use your walkie-talkies, use your cell phones while they'll still last. Notify, leave a message so that when parents call, say that your children are located hither and thither." And by 10 o'clock that night, every single child had been reunited with every single parent. Well, this was amazing because 80% of our parents in that school were World Trade Center parents. And they had either not gotten to work or they were not in harm's way when disaster hit.
80%.
80% of those children's parents were World Trade Center parents. I went to Staten Island on a boat on the ferry. The ferry was so crowded they made us sit down and wear life preservers, which had not ever been used.
You were probably over the limit in weight.
Absolutely over the limit. There were rumors that Dallas had been hit, Washington, Baltimore, all kinds of rumors. And people were saying, "Who hit us? Who did this?" Even rumors about the Chinese Air Force possibly.
How long before you got back home?
I didn't get home until the next day because they wouldn't let us back into Manhattan. And I had to sleep. I slept at the Marine recruiting station because one of them saw me and said, "Are you a priest?" I had on my basic black. And he said, "You're covered in all that dust." And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Well, you look terrible. Why don't you come in and clean up and take a rest?" And I said, "Please tell me what's happened." And so he filled me in, and I spent the night there. And the next day was able to get back into the city.
What was that night like? Could you sleep at all?
No, because my son lived in Washington at the time, near the Pentagon. And I was frantic trying to get in touch with him, and he me. I had talked to another son, and I was married at the time, talked to my wife, and we couldn't find this other son. He called at 2 o'clock in the morning. The phone systems had opened up to an extent, and we just cried on the phone with each other, just in gratitude that we were alive and had been through hell.
Do you have lung issues from it?
Have what?
Lung?
I have not had the lung issues, although many of my contemporaries did. The Environmental Protection Agency told us that the air was fine.
Yep.
And then they came back 2 years later and said we didn't tell you the truth. It was very toxic.
No kidding.
So many of our people had the lung ailment, and so many were afflicted with cancer, including me.
Oh, really?
I had a virulent form of prostate cancer, which was a direct result.
In there. Did you go, how many days before you got back to the church?
Got back to the church in 3 days.
And then you started, because you ended up working at the St. Paul's next door?
Not immediately, but we were all there constantly. St. Paul's, that night, on the 11th, the policemen and women, firemen and women, rescue workers, came in and took over that church. They thought, "Oh, we know this is going to be an open and friendly space." They knocked the door down. They put up porta potties out front. Parishioners came illegally, set up barbecue pits, and began serving these guys and these women hot dogs and hamburgers.
Love it.
So in 24 hours, that had become a respite center, and it continued for the next 11 months.
I thought you were going to say that it was the church where all the firemen hung their boots on it, when they changed their boots out.
It was the church. That was the church.
So for our listeners, son Matt, you remember going up there and all the boots that were hanging on the fence that were left?
Yeah, I think so.
So for our listeners, the firemen and the rescue people would come back, first responders would come back, change their shoes out, and they would hang their old boots on the iron fence there.
On the old iron fence, and there were 300 pairs of boots.
And then they never came back.
They never came back, they never came back.
And they left them there, because I saw them, we went up there to see
Yeah.
Ground Zero a year
Yeah.
later and saw them, and it is just a overwhelmingly emotional.
It is, it is. And St. Paul's Chapel became that too. We had 40,000 visitors a week or almost a year. Because it was the only place to grieve. The city didn't provide a place to mourn. The church was a safe place. People knew that they could cry there and no one would try to take that away from them. So it became quite a place.
Okay, let's take a break. When we come back, we'll continue our conversation with the very interesting and knowledgeable Reverend. Keep going. Let's take a break.
See, that's what happens. Every time.
Gosh, we went up there and saw that. It was so.
People would bring pictures.
I gotta go.
Of their
Can't feel my legs anymore.
their lost parents.
And all of our
They
stuff
also
is down,
bring
so
pictures of soldiers.
that's the end of the Facebook
Grievous,
Live, I think.
contagious, they would bring pictures. But we
Mom,
had to change out.
Say goodbye to Facebook.
Why, is Facebook leaving?
No, my legs and arms are all asleep.
Here, give it to her. We gotta hear the second part.
Are we doing okay?
We're doing
Yeah.
great. So we'll come back.
Great.
This commercial is about to cut off. We're gonna go back and talk about, we're gonna go back and talk about, something else. I don't know what, but something. We're gonna go back and talk about recovery.
With huh? Space for the clock?
20 seconds.
Okay.
Okay, so we're still on. It went off for a while.
No, it's not.
10 seconds.
Okay. I got a hair in my eye. It's driving me crazy.
And we're back.
You are listening to Up in Your Business with Kerry McCoy. Uh-oh. We got it running again?
You going?
I'm hearing Adrian's commercial again. I don't know if anybody else
This is
is.
in your head.
All right, you're listening to Up in Your Business with me, Kerry McCoy. I'm speaking today with Reverend Dr. Stuart Hoke, Episcopal Preacher at Trinity Cathedral in downtown Little Rock, Arkansas. If you have a question, you can send an email to questions@upyourbusiness.org, or you can tweet a question at @AskKerryMcCoy, or if you're shy, you can just creep on my weekly soap opera blog about life as a small business owner at flagandbanner.com. You can get there by going to flagandbanner.com and clicking on my blog where I always post something. And I ain't going to talk about you, Stuart, because you got me all upset. Before the break, we were talking about being at Ground Zero, or being in Wall Street when 9/11 happened, and everything that happened to all the people there, and how wonderful humans come together when they really need to. We were talking about it, and we were talking about how this time every year it's hard on you.
Yeah.
I imagine the nightmares are terrible, but we can lighten it up a little bit by talking about something really wonderful, which is substance abuse. That's not really wonderful, but we can talk about something that you've had great success with. Substance abuse affects so many people in so many ways. And when did you first realize that you had an issue?
I started to realize that sometime around 1984, 85, I was suffering such terrible depression. And I kept going to one therapist after another, and they medicated me for it.
Mm-hmm.
And no one ever said, are you pouring a depressant on your depression?
Why do people not realize alcohol is a depressant?
I don't know, but I'm a smart person. But the first and foremost symptom of the disease of addiction is denial, refusing to acknowledge what in my heart I know to be true. And that was me. I mean, practicing denial to the hilt. It's like that woman saying, is this a movie? When the sky was falling and the rug was being pulled out from under me, I was saying, well, yes, it is. It's just a bad movie. So.
Was there something that happened that you just said, this is the day?
It was a confluence of things. It was the strangest thing. One was a dream that I'd had. And one of the therapists that I'd gone to deal with depression, She was really good about dream analysis, and I was attentive to dreams, but not crazy about that. But one was a dream, one was a book called I'll Quit Tomorrow, written by an Episcopal priest named Bernie Johnson.
Well, you were reading that already?
It was sitting on my bedside table, and somehow it went from the bottom to the top. Now, my wife may have had something to do.
So you were already suspicious
Already suspicious.
and just
I've
living in
grown up with
denial.
it. And I used to take those 20 questions, you would find them in Red Book or Reader's Digest or dentist's office magazines. Are you having trouble with alcohol? Have you lost your car and not known where it is? Yeah, there were 20 questions, and every year I take them to build my character. And I would always say, isn't it amazing I can answer 14 out of the 20 affirmatively and not be an alcoholic? So that's utter denial. But this time, that year, I thought, I'm in trouble.
What
And,
happened that year that made you think you were in trouble?
That the depression had been so bad, and I had been hospitalized, as a matter of fact, with depression. And I had someone come see me in the psychiatric hospital and said, Stuart, your problem is not your psyche. It may be off kilter. Your problem is you drink too much and you drink too often, and you're trying to medicate your feelings. Get to the right place and get the right treatment. And somehow I heard what he was saying.
Was this before 9/11?
This was 30-some years before that.
So how old were you when you quit drinking?
I was 39.
Oh, so you've been sober a long time.
31 years.
You've never had a slip?
No,
You're kidding.
no. And
No desire to go
It
back.
has been the very best thing that's ever happened to me.
You went through 9/11 and didn't drink.
Absolutely. First thing I did when I got back to the city was to go with my friends to one of my meetings. And so many of my, not so many, some of my friends in the meeting had died at 9/11. And that group just was so close to one another in our sobriety. And so it's been 31 years, and it's been a gift. I did go to treatment, and the day I got home from treatment, I met this man, and he said, I'm going to be your sponsor. And I said, I don't need one. And he said, yeah, that's not any of your business. I'm going to be your 12-step sponsor. And I said, well, I've been teaching spirituality for years. I don't need that. And he said, and look where your spirituality has gotten you. And he said, to a drunk farm. Well, that was humbling. So,
How long were you at the drunk farm?
4 weeks.
So, and where were you living? What city at the time when you got the first sponsor?
Amarillo, Texas.
They drink down there in Texas.
Oh, I'm telling you, they're cowboys, and they act like the Marlboro Man. Except in recovery, they show another side. Very, very caring, very faithful, and very loving.
Why do you think that people are so resistant to joining the 12 steps and following the practice that has worked for decades for people?
I think there's still a shame element, even though it's better than it was 31 years ago. If I admit I'm alcoholic, then I'm seen as, well, especially true for women. There's a double standard. A man can say, I'm a drunk, I have trouble with alcohol, and they say, oh yeah, you've been drinking too much, blah, 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 you're just another jock. A woman can say that, and immediately people say, oh, she's a slut. There's another side to her.
Which one do you think is worse for, women or men?
I think it's harder for women to get
I
into
think it's
recovery.
harder for men. Because they have egos.
Well,
So much bigger than
there it
ours.
is. There it is, right there. Ego, shame. Ego. You know what the acronym for ego is, by the way?
No.
Edging God out.
Oh,
You know what the
no.
acronym for shame is?
No.
Should have already mastered everything.
That's another good one. Those are tweetable. I don't know where Arlo is, but she needs to be tweeting. Those are acronyms.
I use those all the time for me. But it is hard.
And it's in the clergy a lot.
The secret to it, though, is pain.
Is what?
Pain. We say pain is the touchstone for all spiritual growth. If I'm in enough pain, as I was at the time, I'm really ready for relief. And if you come to me and say a flight to the moon will give you relief, I might say, take me, I'm yours. But I had some good people surround me and say, we really do think you can find what you're looking for, and you can become the priest you were called to be in the first place.
You can fulfill your destiny.
Yeah, and that's been so true. So
If
I've been
you-
open about my recovery, And I've done a lot in the church, trying to bridge the gap between two facets of spirituality. They're very similar, but they're different. One meets in the basement sometimes of the church, and one meets upstairs, and the two never meet. But there's been some rapprochement that's gone on.
By that, do you mean the congregation and then the clergy?
Mhm. Well, no, the people in the basement are having their meetings, their AA or Al-Anon or Celebrate Recovery or whatever it is. And then upstairs, they're doing their worship. And so,
Oh, that's what you mean by the basement. And
Exactly.
Well, I think a lot of people in AA have a problem with what step is that you got to turn your, something about religious, which step is that about religion? It's 2?
Let's see, made a decision to turn my life and will over to the care of God.
Is that step 2?
That's 3.
3.
Surrender.
Surrender. I think a lot of people have a problem with that. Who cares? Just do it.
Just do it. Nike says just do it.
I mean, really, who cares? If you're miserable, just do it and see if it works. If it doesn't, you can always go back, but you can always try it.
If the pain is great enough, you'll do it.
That's interesting that you have to be in so much pain to move, but people are very resistant to change.
And they say you have to you have to reach a bottom. These days they say, well, you know, you can stop the elevator at any floor. You don't have to go all the way to the basement. You can get off. Alcoholism is a progressive disease. It's chronic. It's fatal.
And I think that's true too. A lot of times people do your 20 questions that you did and say, well, I didn't answer all 20 of them, so I'm okay.
Exactly.
So, I mean, I've even seen that in people I know. They go, well, I never had a car wreck and killed anybody. I never, had a blackout, woke up in the wrong town, what some other people I know have, so I'm not as bad as them. They kind of compare their alcoholism to other people's alcoholism.
And use that adverb yet. I haven't had that happen yet. So we talk about people who have the case of the yets. I haven't killed someone yet. I haven't wrecked my car yet. Don't have a DUI yet.
And then there's the ones that have a good reason for not just drinking, but for lots of things in life. They have a good reason why they don't want to do it, when really it's not an excuse. It's just a reason. You may have a good reason to misbehave, but that's not an excuse to keep doing it.
Yeah, if you're suffering consequences, it's ruining the quality of your life and other people around you. I mean, the signs and symptoms are there.
So is there really? Let me tell everybody tell everybody that they're listening to Up in Your Business with me, Kerry McCoy, that I'm speaking today with Dr. Stuart Hoke, Episcopal priest at Trinity Cathedral in downtown Little Rock. We've been talking about how Dr. Hoke was at the Ground Zero. Wasn't Ground Zero then, but was at Wall Street when the Twin Towers fell. And we spent the first half hour of the show. If you missed it, you should go listen to the podcast next week and hear it. But you also have there's a lot about you online, and you have it's not a TED Talk, but you have a video about you talking about your experience during 9/11.
Yes.
How do you get to that?
It's WRAC in Raleigh, North Carolina.
WRAC?
WRAC.
That's the name of the radio station?
Television station.
TV station.
It's easily findable on Facebook, and just Stuart Hoke and video about it.
Well, if anybody Googles your name, they're going to find tons about you because of your recovery work that you've done, your ministry in recovery, and then because of this life experience that you lived through. And Hoke is spelled H-O-K-E, and we will put links to that on flagandbanner.com's website next week when we upload this podcast. But you did 2 recovery ministries that you're kind of famous for making a program, I think. Or at least I kind of read that you did 2, and maybe 2 type of programs for the congregation and the clergy. Can you speak to that? We don't have much longer.
Across the country, I've been invited to come and do parish workshops on the symptoms of alcoholism, the places one can find recovery, what it's like, how to recognize it, and what it's like on the other side, what recovery is like spiritually. I talk a lot about, I'm not a doctor and I'm not a psychiatrist, but I can talk eloquently about the spiritual aspects of the disease: denial, resentment, isolation, fear, guilt, shame, and this deep longing for connection with something greater than I am, or with just another human being. So I have a lot to say about that. I think the church and the programs of recovery, not just AA, but programs of recovery, speak to that.
Are you doing that here in the lab?
I did, I've done it twice. I've done it at St. Mark's, and I'll do it again soon, I think.
If someone wants to find out about that, how do they find out? Will it be on the Trinity Episcopal website?
Yes,
Probably?
yeah.
So, I guess they can sign up for the Trinity Episcopal newsletter. And
I'll
get
just
it.
Google Trinity Episcopal Cathedral newsletter.
But, but it's not in there right now because you haven't planned it.
Not yet.
Yeah, so you'd have to Google that a lot, or they can just sign up for the newsletter and then finally find out something about you. Because you're pretty interesting about recovery. You're funny. I listened to one of your very first time I heard you preach about recovery, and you're just downright funny.
Well, you told me that one time. I said, what? Like Miss Piggy. Wow, wow.
If you wait too long, is it true you get like wet brain and you can't get well?
Yeah,
That's true.
yeah. It's a chronic, progressive, and fatal disease. We say if it's not treated, if you're alcoholic, you may be a heavy drinker, which you can quit any time, but if you're alcoholic and cannot quit on your own without some spiritual, emotional, and physical help at times, then the end result is going to be jail or insanity, or it's going to be the graveyard. And that's usually the case. And it goes so unrecognizedly. I mean, we call it by every other name. We call it bad communication, child abuse. We have all kinds of names. But look at the root. If you look under every rock, there's probably some alcoholism there. It's the root of the problem.
Poor work ethic.
So many church conflicts are based in somewhere there's an alcohol problem in the church or an addiction problem.
Well, and, Episcopalians and Catholics are kind of historically known for over-serving ourselves.
They used to say about Episcopalians, wherever there are four gathered together, there's always a fifth.
What does that mean?
Like a leader.
Oh, a fifth! Oh, I just got it.
But they've changed the term to leader now, so.
Oh, leader, there's always a fifth. Never heard that before. And I've been called Episcopalian before. You've probably heard that one before.
Yep.
So who inspired you? Jesus Christ, of course.
One of the spiritual writers that's just made a difference in my life is a man named Frederick Buechner, Presbyterian writer, has just really helped me over the years, even before recovery. Another one named James Hollis, who is a Jungian psychologist, and he's been very help me about living in the heart, not all the time in the head, trying to put those two together. If I have a legacy in life, it's going to be, I want to be remembered as being a man not only of the head, I'm a smart person, but a person in the heart, where relationships are really important.
That is so hard to do.
It's so hard to do.
Speaking of legacy, what do you want your legacy to be?
I want to be remembered as someone who is transparent and open. I certainly want to be remembered for my work in recovery, if that's possible, because that's an ongoing problem, and it's getting worse and worse and worse and worse.
It seems like it's a societal problem.
It is. It is. It's as if a society is addicted.
It is kind of.
Suffering
it seems like
addictive illness.
it's like it's okay to be drinking all the time.
And to live in denial.
If you could tell yourself, 20 years ago, something, what would it be?
20 years ago, I was finishing that THT. I had just been hired at Trinity Wall Street. Had been sober for 11 years. I was moving toward the top of my game. I don't know that I would have changed a thing at the time.
Lovely.
Living in New York. Now I realize I wasn't at the top of my game then. I am now. It's just that I'm older. I'm 72 now, and I've had limitations, including some joint problems. But the last 5 years for me have been the richest time in my entire life. And part of that excitement has been the last year of moving back to Arkansas and reconnecting with friends and family all over the state. Connectedness is what I long for. And some of that's I've had realized. So things like this just are thrilling to me.
You think it was Providence that you ended up in New York when Morris fell?
You know I do, in so many ways, because I was able to contribute immediately and right on target with a number of things. And we don't need to go into what they were, but my pastoral skills, what I have been through in my own life, which has not been without struggle. I mean, I was able to just walk right into the situation and do good ministry.
How'd you decide to leave and come back?
To Arkansas? This problem I have, my brother's a physician in the state.
Oh, your joint pain?
And I called him one day and he said, that's serious. And he said, you're gonna need some medical help. And I said, and I cannot get it where I am, I'm trying. He said, why don't you come here? Why don't you just move over here? And I'll navigate this world for you. So the next morning,
Somebody say that to me, please.
I called him back the next morning and said, I think I'll just move. He said, well, that's a great idea.
I love your brother.
So my brother inspired me.
I love that. I've got a gift for you. Matthew, hand me that.
You can't reach that?
This is for you. It's flags. It's a desk set of all the places you've ever lived. That's the United States. That's Tennessee, in case you don't know.
I do.
That's Texas.
Arkansas
That's Arkansas, and there's your Episcopal.
and USA.
And right in the middle.
I love it.
In the highest spot.
I love
Isn't that
it.
great?
Yes.
Thank you for coming on today.
Oh, I'm
I so
delighted.
enjoyed, even though you made me cry.
Well,
I could cry again thinking about it. I don't start talking about it, I'll start crying again. I'll be like, oh, I'll be crying all the time. So tired of seeing her cry. All right, who's my guest next week, Corey? Do you have it over there? I think it is Roy Dudley Estate Sales. Yeah, Roy Dudley Estate Sales. He is an awesome guy. Have you ever been to any of his estate sales? Well, he's kind of famous here in Little Rock. If you ever get to go to a Roy Dudley estate, you should go. He's got good stuff. He's been a collector all of his life. His family were collectors. He worked for Blue Cross Blue Shield and still had a part-time job with antique stores. So I can't wait to have him on. And we're going to talk about antiques and reselling your old stuff. If you have a great entrepreneurial story you would like to share, I would love to hear from you. Send a brief bio and your contact info to questions@upyourbusiness.org. And finally, to our listeners, thank you for spending time with me. If you think this program has been about you, you're right, but it's also been for me. Thank you for letting me fulfill my destiny. My hope today is that you've heard or learned something that's been inspiring or enlightening, and that it, whatever it is, will help you up your business, your independence, or your life. I'm Kerry McCoy, and I'll see you next time on Up in Your Business. Until then, be brave and keep it up.
You've been listening to Up in Your Business with Kerry McCoy, a production of flagandbanner.com. If you would like to hear this program again next week, a podcast will be made available online with links and resources you heard and discussed on today's show. Kerry's goal, to help you live the American dream.
That's a wrap. Facebook, I love being with you. Don't you love him? Great show, everybody. Thanks in the new studio. Good job, everybody. Facebook, we'll see you next Friday at 2 o'clock. We'll have some of the kinks worked out by then, too.